What's going on? We're going to jump right in to round what I would do mock draft if I was the GM of all 32 teams. Again, this is not predictive. This is a what I would do mock. So it's going to be going off of my player grades, how I value things. Starting off with the first pick, though, I'm going to be breaking my rule, and I'm going to take Fernando Mendoza. I would not take Fernando Mendoza with the number one pick in any draft class, including this one. I think for the Raiders, it makes more sense to take an edge, build that defense up even stronger. You know, you're going to build a foundation with this head coach, and you could say, yeah, but you're not going to have a number one pick next year if you do that because you're going to have a strong defense with a good head coach. But you'll probably get a quarterback the same caliber as Fernando Mendoza with that pick, so what's the concern? With that being said, I don't want to mess this up completely and make it so unrealistic. So we're going to take Mendoza. But starting off at pick 2, the New York Jets. This is a pick that I've wrestled with a lot. Originally, this was an open and shut Ruben Bain, no questions asked. I'm not worried about the scheme fit. I think he plays more as an end in this system, which works just fine. He's an elite run stuffer. He has a great power profile, good enough finesse profile to complement with incredible physical attributes despite his arm length. I have no real complaints about Ruben Bain at all. But I've really started to fall in love with the potential of Arvell Reese and also the day one impact. The difference between Arvell Reese and Jalen Walker from last year, who I really wasn't that big of a fan of, is Arvell Reese comes into the NFL day one as an elite off-ball linebacker prospect. If he was coming in purely as an off-ball backer, I would have him over Sonny Styles. He's great in coverage, almost as good as Sonny Styles. He's amazing versus the run, way better than Sonny Styles in that department, and he's a great pass rusher as a blitzer. But obviously, he's shown the ability off the edge, and that's why he's coming into the NFL most likely as an edge or a 3-4 hybrid end, where he's dropping into coverage, playing the run, and the early downs, and then as the third down, pure pass rusher off the edge. Arvell Reese is so good. Honestly, I've truly fallen in love with this player. But if you're the New York Jets, we're stacked with capital in the next 2 classes. Every mock I have done, I've loved the results. With that said, we need to set the tone, and just taking a player who we're confident there's no way we're going to miss on. We don't really have to worry about developing him ourselves. He's going to just come in, be a day one impact player with a super high ceiling as well. And for me, that's Ruben Bain. So we're going to take him. One more thing, this is not scripted at all. I didn't do the picks beforehand. I'm doing this live just so I can give a more in-depth analysis of my thought process of each pick. I've done mocks before just to, get myself ready. Pick 3, the Arizona Cardinals, one of the more contentious picks in the draft. Everyone wants me to just say Francis Maianoa and walk away because nobody cares about this pick. You need to build something. Now, Arvell Reese is screaming to be picked. With that being said, there's at least 3 of these hybrid backers that the Arizona Cardinals have had in the last few years that they just have not figured out what to do with. Obviously, Isaiah Simmons. Zaven Collins is the best one of them, and they still don't even use him. And I think Zaven Collins is the kind of guy who's going to go to a new team and he's going to have a much better role. He's going to be great, especially in this era of the true nickel back and the hybrid guarding the middle of the field. And then there's one that I'm missing. Oh, BJ Ojolari. That's another one. Yeah. I mean, they've just taken players like Arvell. I mean, there is no player like Arvell Reese, but you know what I mean. These hybrid backers and just have proven time after time that they don't know what the hell they're doing with them. So it kind of scares me away from taking Arvell Reese because if I'm the GM of the Cardinals, I'm just going to say, hey, this is not our strength. We have to accept in this life that we have strengths and weaknesses. And that's not our strength. So then the next thing becomes, okay, the only other players worthy of these picks are going to be Caleb Downs and Jeremiah Love. We're not looking to take one of those guys given the situation that we're in. Caleb Downs definitely a nice enforcing piece of the defense. And if you were able to trade Budda Baker for an early second-round pick or maybe even a late first-round pick somehow, then I would be a lot warmer up to the idea of taking Caleb Downs with this pick. But right now, I'm more so trying to hopefully trade back The one team that I always come to is the Kansas City Chiefs, because Arvell Reese could kind of be not just a Leo Chenal replacement, but a major upgrade. I don't even remember who the Chiefs brought in to replace Leo Chenal, but Leo Chenal has been a key cog of that defense. And now that he's gone, you could replace him with a player who's not just going to play coverage really well, probably even maybe better than Leo Chenal if it's his ceiling. He's going to be better against the run than Leo Chenal was. No, they didn't even try to replace him. Yep, I mean, there you go. And is also going to be an all-world pass rusher potentially, which this team desperately needs help getting after the quarterback. The question is, with the Chiefs having as many weaknesses as they do, needing a complete rebuild of the secondary, safeties and corners, not just the corners because they lost the 2 in free agency. They need safeties as well. Still wanting help on the offensive line, needing another receiver. You know, Rashee Rice is very good. He can play that X fine as like a intermediate run after catch monster. I think some people overrate Rashee Rice a lot, and some people underrate him a lot. We just need to accept him what he is, which is like a really high-end number 2 receiver. As a guy who's just so dominant with the ball in his hands, but he's not a number 1 in terms of separation. He's definitely not a number 1 in terms of his route tree. I would not give up the second first if I was the Chiefs in this trade. There's absolutely no way. It would probably be 9-40, and probably the Rams third that we take next year. If I'm the Cardinals, I still probably get any lineman I want with that pick, that 9th pick. If you're Kansas City, though, you're pigeonholing yourself a little bit into being able to fill multiple of those weaknesses, specifically in the secondary, when I know I could probably get Caleb Downs at pick 9, who's going to do a lot of good things for me, maybe even Mansour Delane. With that being said, I really like the depth of this corner class, especially from Kansas City. There's a lot of guys who can play outside man coverage, which is really all this Kansas City Chiefs team wants to do, is just don't get beat over the top. We're going to send so many blitzes. We just want you to be able to stick with them well enough to where our pressure can get there, our created pressure can get there, because we're not getting any pressure from our actual players. And then obviously they're going to need someone to be a disruptor in the nickel, whether that be from the safety position or corner. I'm going to pull the trigger on this trade. Let's be aggressive for Kansas City. 9-40 and next year's 3 that we got from LA for 3, and they'll give us 143. And we're going to take Arvell Reese for Kansas City. If I had stayed with that pick, I think I would have just had to take Arvell Reese and just say position value be damned, history be damned. We've got to take the best player available here in the start of this new rebuild. The Tennessee Titans. This pick has for the longest been Carnell Tate for me. Not because I think Carnell Tate is the best receiver in this class, not because I think he's a can't-miss prospect, but because Cam Ward needs help. I'm of the mindset that you build a foundation and then you bring in a QB, but if you have the QB already, you have got to give him help immediately. And Cam Ward is in desperate need of a number 1 receiver. I think Calvin Ridley becomes a much better player if you put him as a Z rather than an X. And Wan'Dale Robinson getting all that money kind of pigeonholes you into not being able to take Mekhi Lemon. Not because Mekhi Lemon will never be an X receiver in the NFL who can play on the outside, but because I think you would want him to come in and be your slot day 1, similar to JSN and Amon-Ra, who he keeps getting compared to. Those guys developed outside skill sets, and that's how they became superstars. But with their initial seasons, they were playing above 70% of slot snaps. So it would have to be Carnell Tate if it's a receiver. I haven't addressed this yet. I hate David DeBailey. I were to pull up my big board right now. He's my number 6th edge. And not factoring an offensive lineman, he's my number 25th ranked player. So realistically, probably like in the high 30s. Yeah, I don't like that player at all. My grade on him is at second round or first round if it's a position of need, preferably in the second round. So I don't want to hear any comments about David Bailey. He's a pure athletic traits player. All the other athletic traits player are going way later than him, but he's projected to go in the top 5. Could not tell you why. So I've been wanting Cardinal Tate for the longest for those reasons I just said. But now I'm kind of looking at this offensive line and saying, like, wow, this offensive line unit sucks. This is another team that you would kind of want to trade down potentially, but there's no trade down candidates. As for Jeremiah Love, the most commonly selected player with this pick, I just think if I'm going with a weapon, I would way rather get Cam Ward, a pass catcher. As great as Jeremiah Love is, Sonny Styles is cool too as someone who can play the middle of this defense, but there's no team in this entire draft that I would take Sonny Styles over Caleb Downs for, because Caleb Downs can just do anything that you want Sonny Styles to do. It is just better. But no, I'm not going to focus on the defense. This team needs a help for Cam Ward. Yeah, we're going to go Cardinal Tate. We're going to just say, you know what, Cam Ward, here you go. Here's a guy who is never going to be one of the 5 or 10 best receivers in the league probably, but it's going to go out there and be an immediate impact day one X receiver, a guy who's going to make those tough catches when you're in trouble, who's going to win downfield, create actually some separation for you. He's going to push Calvin Ridley into a role where he's a lot more comfortable. All right, so yeah, Cardinal Tate going to the Titans, giving Cam Ward some help. The Giants at pick 5. This is another team that I was solidifying my pick for them for a while. I was like, this team is a well-rounded enough roster to where I just want to take Jeremiah Love and give this offense a real spark plug, take some of the burden off of Malik Nabers. This is the only legitimate player. Give your rookie quarterback, or your second-year quarterback, some help. But man, the more I look into it, the more I really like the idea of going Vega Ione here. And even Caleb Downs, I mean, it's just a truly transcendent playmaker. If you're trading Dexter Lawrence, then this pick has to be Caleb Downs. Update, that's exactly what happened. So they will take Caleb Downs, but I want to let the rest of my analysis for this pick play out, and there will be more updates once we get to the Bengals pick, because you desperately need the defensive help. And you know that this offense can somewhat manage on the legs of Jackson Dart and the playmaking ability of Malik Nabers. It's not going to be pretty, but you would way more need the defensive help in that situation. But if you're keeping Dexter Lawrence, which I'm making the assumption that they are, I'm going to go offense. The question is, am I going Jeremiah Love or Vega Ione? Francis Maigoa as well as someone who gives you... Yeah, I'm going to go with Francis Maigoa, a guy who I'm going to start at guard, but is going to give me flexibility when Andrew Thomas misses his 5 games a year, so that we don't just get completely killed at tackle. And we're going to take a receiver with that second-round pick. Pick 6, the Cleveland Browns. Their first 2 picks undoubtedly have to be on the offensive line and receiver. When I look at the receivers that are on the board now, and specifically Mekhi Lemon versus my best receiver in this class versus the offensive lineman on the board now versus the offensive lineman on the board at 24, I have a much, much higher chance of getting a really good offensive lineman who I like at pick 24 than I do of a receiver. Mekhi Lemon is the only receiver of his caliber, in my opinion, left in this draft class. The next best guy would be Jordan Tyson. Then you're thinking, maybe I can get Omar Cooper at 24. Probably not. And you're thinking about Chris Brazzell and Denzel Boston. So I'm going to make this pretty easy and go with Mekhi Lemon. We're not going to think about defense. Pick 7, the Washington Commanders. Jeremiah Love, obviously everyone wants this to be the pick. The question is, who is going to give you the best chance to make the biggest impact day one in your team? It's not going to be an offensive lineman. It's not going to be one of these receivers that are left. So I'm looking at 3 players, and you have to factor in that we don't have a second round pick. So that's why this impact has to be so massive. Because this is 1-by-1 chance of adding a player who I'm really confident is going to make a big day one impact. So we're looking at Caleb Downs, Mansour Delane, and Jeremiah Love. The case for Jeremiah Love does not need to be made. This is a team with one of the worst receiver rooms in football, and their best receiver, who isn't even a number 1 receiver in the NFL, is also super injury prone and getting older, so we're in desperate need of weapons. In a lackluster running back room, the only thing we have going for us in the running back room is the power of friendship brought through Corey Krosky-Merritt's legs and Jaden Daniels' ability as a designed runner. As for Caleb Downs, doesn't need to be explained. This is a guy who you can stick as a true game wrecker on your defense. He could potentially single-handedly transform your defense, and I can only imagine what a guy like Dan Quinn would do with such a chess piece. And for Mansour Delane, I think Mansour Delane is a true, genuine shutdown corner, like worthy of being a top 5 pick. On my big board, I had him as the 4th ranked player in this draft with position value included. I think Mansour Delane is just that good. I think he's a genuine shutdown day 1 corner. And in a division where you're looking at teams that have CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens on the same team, A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith on the same team, Malik Neighbors and Darnell Mooney on the same team. No, genuinely, like, Mike Sainristil is good as a number 2 option, but adding a true shutdown number 1 corner could really, really ease things up for this defense. And if your free agency moves on the D-line hit, and you can actually generate some pressure, and then you're looking at, we've got Trey Amos out there, Mike Sainristil, Nick Cross, who we added in free agency, who I really like, and then you're getting a shutdown corner in the mix as well. I really like what this could do for your defense. Caleb Downs is the higher impact player, but I think Mansour Delane makes more fit given their situation and what they need, so I'm going Mansour Delane. Less conversation about Caleb Downs, because he's coming off the board right now for the Saints. Saints are in a position where they can take the best player available, and they're getting the best player in this draft in terms of his individual dominance compared to his position, and my number 3 player on the big board. Coming back to Arizona, and just like I said, you can take whichever offensive lineman you wanted at pick 3, except for Francis Mauigoa because he's gone. Probably would have been the pick. I don't like this narrative that's going out there that the Cardinals just had a horrible right tackle last year and that was pretty much all the problem. Their whole offensive line sucked except for Paris Johnson. Bring in Isaac Seumalo, who I like, but no, this is not just a right tackle thing. This is you just need help on the entire offensive line except for your left tackle and left guard. And let's not act like Isaac Seumalo is going to be around forever. So we're going to take the best offensive lineman available, who for me, this isn't a question, it's Vega Ione. And now if you're the Bengals... Hey, so quick update from future me. As I'm editing this video, last night the Bengals traded pick 10 for Dexter Lawrence. As for the value of the trade itself, I was pretty shocked because I was at work, so I didn't see the full details. But when I saw pick 10 was involved, I was just assuming that they were also going to get the Giants' 2nd round pick. So it kind of really caught me off guard when I seen it was just 10 for Dexy straight up. I think Dexy is probably the best defensive tackle in the NFL right now. I'm not too worried about his down year last season, and I think he'll make a great immediate impact for this defense that I think really needed some interior pass rush more than they even needed edge rush help. So I think it was a great move for their defense. Definitely a bit of an overpay for sure. They gave him a 1-year, $28 million extension. As for the actual mock itself, if you want to still watch my thought process on pick 10, please do. It kind of touched on not just the Bengals pick, but also my thought process on the draft and prospects as a whole. Feel free to skip it if not. They ended up going with Sonny Styles, but going back, I redid the mock. I thought I was going to have to redo this whole video, but it actually came out pretty cleanly because I would have had the Giants at 5 take Caleb Downs. Then the Saints missing out on Caleb Downs take Sonny Styles. The Giants at 10 then are looking at either Dylan Thieneman, Jermon McCoy, or just taking Francis Mauigoa at a later pick, and I decided that was still the best move. It's upsetting that Caleb Downs isn't here because that was the player who's going to most perfectly fit into what you need defensively, but there's a lot of good options here still. There's Jermon McCoy as an outside playmaker who can really make a difference for you, as someone who can actually cover. There is, I think that's less of a need given your division, but it's still a need for any great defense, especially a guy like that who can force so many turnovers. There's Sonny Styles, who can give you a lot of what you were looking to get out of Caleb Downs, just at a slightly different position, and maybe a little bit less effective, but also maybe even a higher ceiling. Although I think the ceiling for safeties is being underrated when you think about how valuable the true nickel position is in this modern NFL landscape. You're going to hear me talk a lot about that because I have so many players who I think are going to fit that mold, and we're going to discuss them constantly. And then Dylan Thieneman, I compared him to Jesse Bates. I think it's a very one-to-one comp. And there is a clear difference in this defense. There's the Bengals with Jesse Bates, perennial AFC contender, whose defense is just good enough to make timely plays. And then there's post Jesse Bates, worst defense in NFL history. That is not a coincidence. It's a direct one-to-one causality. I'm not saying that he is the sole reason for that, but man, he is by far the biggest reason. So the impact that Dylan Thieneman could have here is massive. That being said, I don't see anyone else taking him for a while. So if we could trade out of this pick for a team who really wants to get a running back here, that would be sensational because Jeremiah Love is still available. I don't think if you're Dallas with your defensive needs and Jermod McCoy sitting right there on the board, that you can say, no, let's trade up. It wouldn't cost a lot to trade up, but let's trade up for a running back when we just had Javonte Williams had the season that he had. But if he made it to the pick, I would 100% take him. Rams, no, we're not trading up, especially not for a running back after. Although I would love to have, if I did not have Kyron Williams making so much money to be maybe the second best running back on his team, then I would love to take Jeremiah Love, but we've got to build the best situation we can right now. Nope, the Vikings have too many holes. Yeah, I can't see a team coming up for Jeremiah Love here. We're going to bite the bullet, and we're just going to say, you know what, I'm taking Sonny Styles. Give me the ceiling. The Dolphins would love to take Jeremiah Love here, but they have Devon Achane, unless they're planning on trading him. Although, I don't think it makes any sense to take a running back at 11 and trade your starting running back when you're hoping that the guy you take at 11 could be as good as him. I really want to address this offensive line. I could also take Jermod McCoy here. Now that I'm thinking about it, I feel like Vega Ione is always available here whenever I do this, and I always just take him for them. But now Arizona has them. We could potentially take a tackle. Either Blake Miller or Monroe Freeling. No, I would rather just get the highest impact defender that I could here, which at this point is looking like it's Jermod McCoy. Yeah, let's just get a guy who I'm really confident is going to be a great corner in the NFL. For Dallas, we're honestly kind of cheering because it would have been hard to pass on Jermod McCoy given our team situation, but we're like, okay, screw this. We're taking Jeremiah Love. This, to me, is a DeMarco Murray, Zeke Elliott situation where you're like, oh, we had great running back production last year, but it's because your scheme and offensive line and offense allowed that running back to thrive. And now you put an actual superstar there and you're going to watch him tear up the league. With that being said, we better not sniff offense for the rest of the draft. That's the only way I would take an offensive player if I was the Cowboys, is Jeremiah Love falling. Now we get to the Rams. Originally, I was all in on taking a tackle here. But with how good this offensive line played last year, receiver is obviously a need for them with Devontae Adams trade rumors, as well as Devontae Adams just being older. You like your defense overall with, Trent McDuffie, Jalen Watson, Quentin Lake playing your nickel, Cam Curl and Cam Kitchens, the Cam duo. In the back end, your defensive line is obviously set. You could definitely take Kenyon Sadiq here as another weapon, but I think you would rather look for a guy who can actually replace Devontae Adams. So now you're saying, okay, Omar Cooper is a perfect scheme fit for the McVay offense. Jordan Tyson is the higher ceiling player, but the last thing this receiver room needs is another injury-prone player. A really underrated player in this draft. Kyle Lewis is the single most underrated player in this draft. I'm praying that the Steelers take him at 21. I know it's not going to happen. When we talk about these true nickels, and Kyle Lewis is a linebacker, but he's obviously a nickelback, man, he would fill that role so well. And I think he can do that for this team that's missing that presence over the middle. If I'm the Rams, I'm looking for the best chance to win the Super Bowl this year before things kind of start to go to shit offensively. Before we start losing offensive linemen, losing Matthew Stafford, losing Devontae Adams, maybe even losing Puka Nacua. Who the hell knows? Hitting a receiver on this pick, or Kenyon Sadiq, would give you legitimate upside to be better than the 2013 Broncos offensively. I'm just going to take the best pass catcher available, which in my opinion is Kenyon Sadiq. Going to Baltimore, I don't know why this is chalked up as, oh, they just need to take offensive line. Don't get me wrong, their offensive line is horrible. But this defense still sucks. At least the defensive front. I mean, listen, I like Trey Hendrickson, not as much as the next guy, but I like Trey Hendrickson. But this defensive line is nothing. I mean, Broderick Washington and Travis Jones are startable NFL players. And Trey Hendrickson's a great pass rusher who gives you nothing as a run defender. Nadi Madubuike, I'm hoping he makes a full recovery back. It's not even clear if he's going to play this year, let alone be his full self. And you saw it affect this team last year. You saw good, talented corners not play up to their potential because they're getting no pressure. You saw Roquan Smith have one of the worst single-season fall-offs I can remember, especially at that position. This is a team that desperately needs pass rush pressure. And I think Akeem Mesidor is great in terms of stepping up as a day one impact player and elevating the ceiling of this team. You could also maybe look to the interior, but that's not what I would think. People want them to take a pass catcher, or it's kind of same thing with Kenyon Sadiq that I said about Kyron Williams, is we just paid Mark Andrews this money. Would I have ever done that? Absolutely not, no way. But I'm not going to draft a tight end in the first round, no matter how much you tell me, oh, he's a slot receiver, after I just gave Mark Andrews that bag. In the absence of an elite interior offensive lineman, I'm not going to take one of these tackles. I'm going with Akeem Mesidor, trying to build up this defense for James Winter. The Buccaneers. This is a team that is underratedly bad, in my opinion. I think they could really use a full rebuild on this whole roster, honestly. With that being said, we're going to go with the best player available here. Who is that, though, is the question. I would argue it's probably one of these defensive tackles, one of the only good positions that this team really has set down. I think this team underratedly needs receiver help. You could go Jordan Tyson and swing for the upside there. The two players who we would like most for this team just got taken, which is what makes it a little bit tough. I think this team needs help offensively. So we are going to go. My thought process here is Jordan Tyson has a higher ceiling. Kind of does a lot of similar things that Emeka Egbuka does, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But if you're looking for a guy who you can just get the ball to right away and dominate after the catch, that's Omar Cooper. And I think that's something that this team could really use. The only guy on their team who can really do that is Bucky Irving. We're going to take Jordan Tyson and hope for the best. Now the Jets are up. Omar Cooper staring me right in the face. The worst run after catch team in the NFL could easily add a receiver who's dominant, a running back with the ball in his hands. We drafted a great front seven player. So now I'm more looking at the back end to my defense, specifically an outside corner. And my highest graded outside corner on the board would be Chris Johnson out of San Diego State. I think this guy is underrated in how good he can be on the outside. Is he as versatile, as dynamic of a player as Jermod McCoy or Mansour Delane? Absolutely not. But he's a guy who I think steps in right away and gives you great coverage presence. You can also get a rangy playmaker in Dylan Thieneman or Emmanuel McNeil Warren. This guy who can just run over your defense. I'm not going to address the offensive line. I really like what they have there. I want to keep building on that defense. We're going to go with Chris Johnson. The Lions, probably the most chalk pick of the draft, although it's tempting not to take a pass rusher here with how much you would like help there. The issue I have with needing an edge rusher for this team is without Akeem Mesidor being available, I look at David Bailey, TJ Parker, Zion Young. These are not guys who I see getting pressure on the quarterback immediately. If there's one guy who I trust to be really good right away, it's Zion Young. David Bailey definitely has the highest ceiling of these guys. We can definitely get a defensive lineman at 50. Yeah, we're gonna try to rebuild this run game through the offensive line. Give me Blake Miller. Minnesota now. Dylan Thieneman's looking me right in the face, but so are all three of these D tackles. I think for this team, generating pressure up the middle is going to be more valuable than the elite ability to just erase a deep third of the field, specifically the deep middle. I love Dylan Thieneman, but I think for Minnesota, the interior pressure is more valuable. So then which one of these first three D tackles, Caleb Banks, Peter Woods, and Kristen Miller, would you rather have? Kristen Miller is the most well-rounded of the three, Caleb Banks, the freak athlete with injury concerns, and Peter Woods, a really good athlete who's really good at getting after the quarterback even after a down year. If I'm Minnesota, I would rather... Caleb Banks is my number one D tackle in the class, but I would rather skip the injury worries and go with Peter Woods. Carolina, with no Kenyon Sadiq available, with no Jordan Tyson available, it's really hard not to go back into that D tackle well and say, let's keep bolstering this defense and generate some interior pressure, because we've invested so much into our edge group between draft capital and the Jalen Phillips contract. Let's get an interior pass rushing presence who can help us be a competitive football team right away and raise our ceiling. Sadly, we're not getting a pass catcher. Give me Caleb Banks as a guy who's just going to get after the quarterback and create pressure. Dallas is on the clock. We did not get Jerron McCoy to fall, obviously. We do still have Avion Terrell, but I like Deron Bland in the slot better than I like the idea of him trying to go back outside when he's proven he can't do it anymore. I want to go Dylan Thieneman as just the best player available defensively here. I could also just go David Bailey. Even though I have the other guys graded higher than him, I think he does a lot of what you were missing from Micah Parsons. This is the Micah Parsons pick too. That's hilarious. No, I think you'd rather just get the best immediate impact player for Dallas and take Dylan Thieneman. Now it's Pittsburgh. I want a playmaker of the middle of the field. We also really need offensive line help. Monroe Freeling has super high ceiling. Spencer Fano has more position flexibility, which I think this team kind of needs. I would rather try to trade back up and get a linebacker, especially with Jacob Rodriguez still in the class as well too. Yeah, middle linebacker is such a huge need for this team, but I would rather keep building out these trenches and attack an offensive lineman earlier. Let's go with Spencer Fano. The Chargers, when you bring in a coach who goes out of his way to point out that we don't build through the interior of this offensive line, and your front office says we don't build through this offensive line, I'm not going to invest my time in trying to get an offensive lineman, or at least the interior of this offensive line, I should say. The interior of this defensive line is a more interesting point with Kristen Miller still available, also trying to get edges. This is a defense that is underratedly bad. It's very untalented. It's been covered up by Jesse Minter's genius for a long time. I think you go out there and you take Zion Young. Call it a day. The Eagles, probably the easiest pick of the draft. Man, no, it's not actually. I was going to just say how easy it is to walk up Max Hanacourt to the podium with how bad this offensive line was last year. But Emmanuel McNeil-Warren is looking me right in the face as one of the best playmakers in the entire class. I prefer McNeil-Warren over Thieneman, but Thieneman is just such a more polished, safe prospect. But gun to my head, I would rather take McNeil-Warren. This defense was still so good last year, and the offense was horrible. You have to try to invest in this offense. We'll go Max Hanacourt. Another update. A.J. Brown getting traded before the season starts for sure is the rumor. So no Max Hanacourt. This pick is going to be Omar Cooper. When the team that does take Omar Cooper is up, I'll interject again. And then Cleveland just takes Monroe Freeling, who apparently they want to take at 6. That's why we took a receiver at 6. Now it's Chicago. Man, would it be hard to pass on Emmanuel McNeil-Warren. But man, is this defensive line horrible. Emmanuel McNeil-Warren is everything that this defense wants to be. You have 2 second-round picks and a deeper defensive line class. No, man, you cannot keep running out there with just Montez Sweat. You need someone who can actually make an impact there. I love you, Emmanuel McNeil-Warren. I truly do. But we're going to have to go Kristen Miller. Now, if I am Buffalo, this is also a pick where we can take Emmanuel McNeil-Warren. We could take Joe Lewis. No, we're going to take Kyle Lewis. I would love to take David Bailey and try to fix this edge room, but we're going to take who I think is the best player on this board still, and that's Kyle Lewis. San Francisco. I like Keldrick Falk, but for this team, I would rather go David Bailey. I think they have a really good chance of developing him into actually hitting his ceiling. For Houston, the top 3 D tackles are gone, so the next guy you're looking at is Lee Hunter as an elite run stopper. We're not taking running back with this pick, no way. Man, Emmanuel McNeil-Warren looks so juicy. Does anyone want to come up and trade for Emmanuel McNeil-Warren? Because I think Houston could use the extra capital as well. The New York Jets are trying to win not just the draft, but the Super Bowl. How about that? We're going to come up 5 spots from 33 to 28. I'm glad that we took a corner now. We'll give up 103, but then we're going to get 167 back. So the Jets are going to come up here, and they're going to take Emmanuel McNeil-Warren. And I tell you, the Jets win the draft every single time. I mean, God, this is defense that, let's actually look at what this roster would be player for player. I also love T'Vondre Sweat. I feel like that's important to notice. So maybe I'm overrating this unit a little bit. But now I look at this defense. I don't care about Aaron Glenn in the slightest. I want him out the door. He should have been fired already. But whoever is calling this defense is going to be working with T'Vondre Sweat in the middle with David Onyemata. I would actually kick Harrison Phillips into D-tackle instead of David Onyemata. And then you have Will McDonald and Ruben Bain off the edge. You have an elite speed rusher with an elite power rusher coming at you from different angles. That's awesome. You have the veteran leadership of Demario Davis, the impact of Jermaine Sherwood, and Emmanuel McNeil-Warren crashing down the middle. And you're adding Minkah Fitzpatrick to the back end of the secondary with Chris Johnson going out there and playing coverage. This would be so good if I was the GM of every single team and let all these players fall into their lap. Also, all these players still have to hit. You know, every single one of these guys could be a bust. The Kansas City Chiefs are up on the board at 29. They made a huge move going up for Arvell Reese, and they're going to keep building on that foundation. Avion Terrell is sitting right here. Colton Hood is interesting as a guy who fits well in that scheme, but I would rather just bring in Avion Terrell, who I think is a better player and can also fill that nickel role. Now we're looking at Miami. We took Jermod McCoy. Great pick. Great pick. Pat on the back for me. Yeah, let's address the trenches here. Ooh, actually, Omar Cooper is still here. Wow. No, there's not a team I would have taken him for. We're going to go with Omar Cooper. I was going to dip into the offensive line, but I like Omar Cooper there, especially at that value. You saw me say we wanted to address the trenches for Miami before I realized Omar Cooper was there. With him gone, it really comes down to San Francisco. If they take Monroe Freeling, who falls because Cleveland takes Ahanachor, then the Dolphins will take David Bailey. But if San Francisco sticks and picks David Bailey, then they'll go with Monroe Freeling. If I was San Francisco, I would go with Monroe Freeling, leaving David Bailey falling to Miami. And for New England, we still have a lot of edge players that I really like here. It's going to be TJ Parker. And now we get to Seattle, the last pick of the first round. Emmanuel Pregnon is still available. Easy pick. Now we get to the Houston Rockets. I hate the Houston Rockets. I can't wait to watch them get swept. The Houston Texans are on the board. They didn't use their first round pick. Now they're going to have 2 picks in the next 5. And we're really looking to address the defensive interior as well as the offensive line. Caden Proctor and Caleb Lomo. So yeah, we're going with Caleb Lomo. Easy pick there. Arizona at 9. You got Vega Ione earlier. You can dip back into offensive tackle. You could also go for another defensive tackle to pair with the great Walter Nolan. I can't emphasize enough how amazing I think Walter Nolan is as a football player. Could go corner as well, but I'm more inclined to just take one of these higher ceiling players. Let's go with Caden Proctor here. Really double dip in the offensive line. I like that. Now for Tennessee, you got Carnell Tate in the first round. I would like an edge player here. I would not like that edge player to be one of these guys that are left on the board, though. Or we can go with tackle. I'm between Gennings Dunker and Carver Willis. I think we go with Gennings Dunker for pure positional flexibility with J.C. Latham. Let's go with Gennings Dunker as a guy who can maybe take tackle or guard for us. The Raiders finally on the board. Congratulations. I would love an edge player here, yes, but you need to give your quarterback someone to throw to. Denzel Boston is here. Chris Brazzell is here still too. I prefer Chris Brazzell to Denzel Boston. I think Denzel Boston is safer, but Chris Brazzell provides you with a higher ceiling. I'm not really too big on these receivers who are so bad at creating separation in college like Denzel Boston is. He's not undraftable. He's not like a Keon Coleman in terms of route running, but Chris Brazzell is a guy who I think could be an X and just be such a dominant deep threat. I think Flash has really good hands, and I think under the right tutelage, especially under Clint Kubiak, I think Chris Brazzell fits so well. So go get your weapon there. The New York Giants, they took Francis Maigoa. They need a receiver here. They get a receiver here in Denzel Boston. Great board falling for them. Now, the reason I didn't take a defensive tackle with 33 is that I was sure that either Lee Hunter or Caden McDonald would still be here. They're both here. I like Lee Hunter better. Lee Hunter enters, probably the best defense in the NFL. And definitely the highest paid defensive line in the NFL. Cleveland Browns here. I'm tempted to take a nickelback here because that is a need for this defense, and there are so many good ones available. On the other hand, I really want to just keep dipping into this offense and helping them out. There's not a receiver that I would take here. As for the offensive line, there's a lot of guys who we would take here. We will go with Carver Willis. Where the hell is he? All right, Arizona back on the board again. We double dipped into offensive line, and now I really want to go with a Mike Backer. I want to just could go with Caden McDonald to help. Ooh, Caden McDonald actually would be a really good pick here. Oh, Colton Hood. Dude, Colton Hood and Will Johnson corner duo would be sick. No, we're going to go with Jacob Rodriguez to cause some chaos in there. Colton Hood would be really nice, though. If Caden McDonald or Colton Hood. Now, let's tighten up this second. Let's get Colton Hood. New Orleans. This is a really fun team to be a fan of right now, if you ask me. And you brought in Caleb Downs in the first round. You would like a receiver, but I'm not taking any of these receivers with this pick. We're going to swing for the fences and take D'Angelo Pons. I love D'Angelo Pons. I think this is a guy who can be a transformative defensive player. I need to really start getting through these second-round picks so this video isn't an hour long. Miami. Took Jamad McCoy and Omar Cooper. Probably just go for the best trench player available, which is going to be Caden McDonald, in my opinion. We'll take Caden McDonald, and we'll be happy about it. Now the Jets are still back on the clock after making 3 great picks in the first round, all defensively. I want to take another corner. Do you believe me? You should, because I'm probably going to. But I'm going to look around first, especially because our next pick isn't until 140, yeah. So I do want to dip into corner again. I don't love any of these receivers, so I'm not going to go there. And other than that, I actually really like my offense if I'm the Jets, besides receiver and QB. I think you have a good offensive line foundation. You still have Breece Hall, and this is not the class to replace him. So I want to keep going into this defensive line structure I like. And we could definitely go with CJ Allen as like the heir apparent to this older linebacking room. So it's either Brandon Cece or CJ. No, we're going to go with CJ Allen. It's like a run thumper. The Baltimore Ravens back on the clock. In the first round, we gave them Keem Mesidor off the edge. Now you want some offensive line help. We will go for the interior, and we'll go with Kalen Rutledge. Tampa Bay is back on the clock. We gave them Jordan Tyson. You could also really use some defensive line help here. My best defensive lineman available here is going to be Malachi Lawrence, so we'll take that. The Colts are finally on the board. And this is a team that is in a position to win now, but also needs to be building for the future, but also has no money, but also has massive gaps on the roster, and also does not have a single position group worthy of being a Super Bowl competing roster. Also doesn't have a quarterback, despite their quarterback being insanely paid. I'm going to go with the move that I think makes a lot of sense, although it doesn't make a lot of sense to many people. This is a team who needs someone to go out there right away and be able to start for them at quarterback. Man, honestly, I know this is a really unpopular opinion, but I do not think Ty Simpson is the second best quarterback in this draft class. I have the same grade on him and Carson Beck, and I think Carson Beck is just better, and especially in this Indy offense. We're going with Carson Beck. As a guy who could just control this pocket, give the ball to Jonathan Taylor 40 times a game. The Falcons now, their first pick in a draft where they desperately need help at so many positions. Brandon Cisse pops off the board as a guy who could really help here. Jake Galladay, Anthony Hill, and Josiah Trotter, also all guys who could really make an impact for them. Yeah, we're going to go with Darrell Jackson. A really good, in my opinion, penetrating defensive tackle that I would think can make an impact right away for this team. Minnesota now, in the first round, you took a defensive tackle, so now you're going to look potentially for some back-end help or a running back. My best running back available is going to be Mike Washington over Jadarian Price. I think his just one-cut ability is really nice. With that being said, I think he gives you so much of what Jordan Mason already does. The best safety is going to be AJ Halsey by far. It's not necessarily close. The issue with that is that he's more of like a run supporter. He's not going to give me a lot of help in coverage. And you also kind of need a receiver if you're Minnesota. Because I'm like certain that Jordan Addison is on his way out. Man, Casey Concepcion could be a really nice player for this offense. I like Casey Concepcion better than I like the idea of drafting any of these defensive players. If you're Minnesota, you're just going to say, you know what? In case Kyle doesn't work out, we're taking Ty Simpson. And I like that pick. Now if you're Detroit, did go offensive line in the first round, so now I'm looking at an edge player. It's between Cassius Howell and Keldrick Falk. I like Keldrick Falk's potential traits more, so that's where we're going. Then if we're Carolina, I'm not in love with this receiver board. Not really thrilled about the idea of Eli Stowers either. I kind of want to go back into that defense again. Now we'll just go ahead and take Casey Concepcion. Green Bay is finally on the clock, and this is a team with a lot of needs. The interior offensive line could definitely use some work. The entire defensive line outside of Micah Parsons, who's not even going to play week 1, definitely needs some help, and they also need corners. To which Brandon Cisse is still available. We're taking him, no questions asked. Pittsburgh's back on the board. We didn't trade up for a linebacker because I'm really bad at my job. Luckily, Anthony Hill, Josiah Trotter, and Jake Golday are still here. So let's talk about these 3 linebackers that are still here. They've been grouped together so much. Jake Golday, Josiah Trotter, and Anthony Hill. Jake Golday, I see more as like a 3-4 end. A guy who can get after the quarterback, can drop into coverage, can defend the run, but not necessarily someone who's going over the middle. Josiah Trotter is more like a Mike run stopper, but I just think he's not as good as the other two. Anthony Hill is more of like the rangy player, but he's weaker in the run, which is the biggest need for this Pittsburgh Steelers defense. So none of them are fitting like a glove. We're just going to take the highest ceiling player here in Anthony Hill. The Eagles are on the clock. Wide receiver is tempting. Cassius Howell is tempting. AJ Halsey is tempting on the back end of this defense. Double dipping into the offensive line is honestly like probably our best bet. Yeah, we're going to go with Chase Pasantis. The Chargers are going to be really upset. We could have traded back, taken an edge, and gotten an extra pick there, but no. Screw the Chargers. Chargers could take AJ Halsey here, but I think they're more so looking for someone with range. If you want a vertical threat receiver, this isn't necessarily the best board. I think you just stick with the 3 that you already have. You could definitely go with Cassius Howell here as like a true just go and get it edge rusher on 3rd downs. You can also go back to that defensive interior. Grayson Holton's not a guy who have a 2nd round grade on, but if you're just really looking to generate pressure from that inside, that's definitely an option for you. I think you just say, you know what, let's just keep trying to add defensive talent here. And let's go get Cassius Howell. The Jags are finally on the board. And this is a tough spot to be in if you're Jacksonville. You lost a lot in this summer, and the board didn't really shake out that well for you. You would like some help at defensive tackle, especially when it comes to generating pressure. But I don't love the idea of taking one at this pick, especially with your other needs. If anything, you have multiple 3rd round picks. I'm sure you can get one of these guys or trade up for it. You would like some help at corner as well, to which there are still some good ones, but not necessarily anyone who I love playing the outside, especially at this value. You're not going to ever be able to replace Devin Lloyd, but you can go with the best linebacker available, Jake Golday, and that's what we're going to do. Chicago's back on the board. Didn't have to trade up. Stayed put. as much as I just talked about these defensive tackles, I think you kind of want to go back into that well and keep just trying to build pressure. As for tackle, I would really like to replace Ozzie Trapio because I don't think that guy can ever play football again. That was disgusting what happened to him. A lot of wide receiver threes we could take here for Chicago. Could also just go with AJ Halsey. But again, this is a team that's really looking for a rangy cover player at that position. Yes, we're going to go back to the defensive line well. Yeah, for Chicago, we're just going to go with Derek Moore, a guy who I like off the edge. For San Francisco, we're desperately going to have to go with the offensive line. And we are going to go with J.C. Davis out of Illinois. Pretty easy pick there. For Houston, we addressed two really big needs with those two picks. I really like what we did, getting Lee Hunter and Caleb Lomu. We could go to the running back well here, but I think we would rather keep trying to take shots on this offensive line. Honestly, if you're Houston, it's almost tempting if there was still a quarterback available to take one. We're going to try to help out our young quarterback as much as possible. And we're going to go with Mike Washington, a guy who is a vertical one-cut back. I think can really be an impact player here. For Chicago, let's go get Jeremy Bernard as a number 3 receiver who can move the chains. It's either Jeremy Bernard or we shoot for the upside and Bryce Lance. But I would rather have an immediate impact guy who can really be a chain mover, and that's what Jeremy Bernard is. Ooh, Elijah Surratt too. I almost like Elijah Surratt more than I like Jeremy Bernard. Is that crazy? We're going to go with Elijah Surratt instead. The Rams are now on the clock. Don't need a safety, but AJ Halsey is almost like a guy who can play Mike Backer if things go right. So we're going to go with AJ Halsey. Denver's here now. This is a rough team to be drafting for. I like the idea of going to Darian Price here. We'll go with Josiah Trotter, just stir up the middle of that defense. Now New England is back on the clock. And we need a receiver help bad if we're New England. But at the same time, it's like we have two guys who can really only play outside in Romeo Doubs and Kayshon Boutte. I like Boutte as a flanker, and I actually think Doubs is underrated and a guy who could maybe be like not a star, but a solid contributor. Pop Douglas is fine in the slot. Do you just take the ceiling shot with Chris Bell? Do you try to dip back into offensive line? We're going to go with Markel Bell. And last but not least, definitely going to go with Darian Price here. So there is our 2-round mock. I definitely dragged out that second round more than I should have. That's on me. Please, any thoughts you have, leave them down below. This was really fun. I'm going to try to get out position rankings on TikTok, so follow me there. Links in the description. Thanks for tuning in.
MC, make another hit.